You know how every month we get that one big number dropped on us? The unemployment rate. It goes up, it goes down, and it totally shapes how we feel about the economy. But here's the thing. That one number, it doesn't even come close to telling the whole story. So let's dive in and find out what's really going on behind that single digit.
Just look at this chart for a second. That crazy spike you see in 2020, that wasn't just some line going up on a graph. It was the most sudden, dramatic economic shock the US had seen since the Second World War. Millions of people lost their jobs, almost overnight. It's a powerful reminder that behind every single percentage point, there are real people with real stories. And that brings us to this big puzzle we're all seeing. You scroll through the news one day and see a headline screaming about how businesses are desperate for workers, right? Help wanted signs are everywhere. But then, the very next day, you see a story about how millions of people are still fighting to find a decent job. It feels like it just doesn't add up. So, what's the deal? How can we possibly have a worker shortage and a job shortage at the exact same time? Well, to solve this little mystery, we have to look past that headline number and really understand how the heck it's put together in the first place. All right, first things first, let's tackle that headline number itself. We hear it all the time, but what does it actually mean? And more importantly, why does a tiny, tiny change in that percentage represent such a massive shift in the real world? Well, get this. A change of just 0.1% in the unemployment rate. That translates to about 160,000 people. To put that in perspective, that's roughly the entire population of Pasadena, California. So when you hear the rate moved by a full percentage point, we are talking about more than 1.5 million people whose lives are being directly affected. It's huge. Okay, so to really wrap our heads around this, we have to know how the government sorts everybody. It's not as simple as you have a job or you don't. The Bureau of Labor Statistics divides the entire adult population into 3 very specific groups. And honestly, understanding these 3 groups is the key to everything. First up, the easy one, the employed. If you're working for pay, even if it's just part-time, you're in this group. Simple enough, right? Next, we have the unemployed. And here is where it gets tricky. To be officially counted as unemployed, it's not enough to just be out of a job. You also have to be available to start work. And, this is the critical part, you must have actively looked for a job in the last 4 weeks. If you haven't done that, you don't count. Which brings us to this third and frankly massive group of people. These are folks considered out of the labor force. This bucket includes anyone who doesn't have a job and isn't actively looking for one. We're talking about full-time students, retirees, stay-at-home parents, and even people who've just gotten discouraged and given up the search. Now, what's really wild is when you see the scale of this. Look at this chart. Based on data from late 2021, the unemployed group was about 7 million people. But that group considered out of the labor force, a staggering 100 million adults. That hidden population is absolutely enormous, and it's a huge piece of our puzzle. So here's how they actually calculate that headline number you see on the news. They take the employed, add the unemployed, and that gives them what's called the labor force. Then they just divide the unemployed number by the total labor force. But wait a second, who's missing? That's right, that massive group of 100 million people we just saw, they are not part of this equation at all. They're completely invisible to this number. And that, right there, leads us to the real story behind the stats. Because the official rate leaves so many people out, it just can't give us the full picture of how healthy the job market really is. To do that, we have to look at what economists call hidden unemployment. So hidden unemployment is the term for all those people who are really struggling in the job market, but they just don't fit into that strict official definition of unemployed. And they are the reason the economy can feel a whole lot worse than that single headline number makes it sound.
Here are a few perfect examples of what I'm talking about. You've got the underemployed. Think of someone with a finance degree working as a sales clerk. Sure, they have a job, so they're counted as employed, but it's not using their skills at all. Then there are people working part-time who desperately need and want a full-time job. And maybe most importantly, you have discouraged workers, people who want a job but have completely given up looking. They just disappear from the unemployment stats entirely. This is exactly why economists look at a second, super important number, the labor force participation rate. Instead of just focusing on that narrow unemployed group, this number looks at the entire share of the adult population that is either working or looking for work. If you see this number falling, that's a huge red flag that people are dropping out of the workforce altogether.
Okay, so we know how it's all measured. But what actually causes unemployment in the first place? Well, economists generally break it down into two big buckets: the stuff that's happening in the short term and the stuff that's pretty much always there in the long term.
Think of the economy like a roller coaster. The unemployment that goes up and down with the ride, spiking during those scary drops of a recession, that's called cyclical unemployment. But even when the ride is smooth and everything seems great, there's a baseline level of unemployment that's always there. Economists call that the natural rate.
This graph does a great job of showing what happens during a recession. The demand for workers goes down. Now, logically, you'd think wages would drop too, but they usually don't. They're what economists call sticky. And because wages stay high while demand is low, this gap opens up between the number of jobs available and the number of people who want to work. That gap, that's cyclical unemployment. And the cost of this to society is huge. I love this quote. It puts it perfectly. It's like having a perfectly good factory just sitting there, completely idle. Think of all the goods and services those unemployed workers could have been producing. It's a massive lost opportunity for everyone. So what about that natural rate of unemployment that's always there? Well, it's really made of two parts. First is frictional unemployment, which sounds bad, but it's just the normal, healthy time it takes for people to move between jobs. The second part, structural unemployment, is a lot more serious. That's when there's a real mismatch between the skills workers have and the skills employers actually need. And one of the biggest drivers of that structural unemployment today is technology. Take these factory robots, for instance. They might make certain types of jobs totally obsolete. And while new jobs are often created, they might require brand new skills, leaving a lot of workers behind if they don't have the right training.
So now you have the tools. You can look past that single headline number and start to read the economic weather like a pro. And this is so important because that weather does not feel the same for everyone. You see, that single unemployment rate is just an average, and averages can hide a lot. When you actually break the data down, you see the economic weather is completely different for different groups of people. For decades, the unemployment rate for Black Americans has consistently been about twice as high as it is for white Americans. The experience of the economy is just not the same for everyone.
So the next time you hear that single number on the news, what are you going to ask? Are you going to wonder about the underemployed, or the discouraged workers who've given up, or the millions of people who aren't even being counted in the first place? Because that's where you'll find the real story.